first speaker is Sophie Lee, reading her poem, Sweet Strings of Silver.
The peace of age is a quiet fear we carry, as we flee from the shadows cast by responsibility, shaping it into be a monster, suffocating the freedom we deem to be only found in youth. We search for love, longing for a version of it we've imagined, chasing a fleeting feeling so easily replaced. Yet as sweet strings of silver play the violins of time, you sense the echoes of countless smiles lingering in mirrors of years to come. Your fingers tracing the delicate lines marking the passage of time, lines etched not by sorrow but by joy. How blessed are you, you who has lived a life where love's remnants are still within your reach. Real love, found through laughter, vulnerability, friendship, as though you returned to childlike innocence, its warmth enduring still. As the years slip by like a C minor whistling in the wind, you looked for this love before realizing it grew within you, and it is you. You gave it to the girls who grew into the women you cherish. It's a love deeper than the love you offered a boy who never did and never will become a man. Age is but a buried fear, concealed in the lines of wrinkles you pretend not to see. A taste of something unreachable, a dream of a life we feel is inhabitable, a passion unpursued, lost in hesitation, lost in the fear of eyes of judgment. These are the boundaries that we place on our burning souls, coloring every technicolor dream in hues of black and white, as we wake and downplay the fire that ignites within us through our dreams. But what a waste to live for mediocrity, to live as though another chance at life is guaranteed. There's an itch in your mind, and there's one in mine, a spark begging to be set aflame, whispering for you to strike the match, to write, to create, to solve, to do anything but let your dream remain just a dream. Golden rays of glory spill through the living room windows, and I still hear the voice of the gray-haired angel I adore, the one who never settled for adequacy, the one who loves with the purity of a child. You find her in the quiet moments, when the fireplace crackles beside a mystery novel, when you remove the tea bag from your cup, when you wander through art museums, farmers markets, and hear the laughter that fills rooms with love. She's the golden rays on Sundays. She's within you, and she is you. What a dream to look back on a life steeped in love, to hear the melodies played by sweet strings of silver that fall across your face and cover your ears, playing the heartstrings of nostalgia and love, real love, a dream I urge us not to keep in black and white, but to set aflame in technicolor. Thank you.
Thank you, Sophie. Our guest today is an award-winning freelance travel writer who has reported from 7 continents for publications like the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, Time Magazine, Food and Wine, and others. She is a contributing editor at Condé Nast Traveler and is on the faculty of the Columbia School of Journalism's Columbia Publishing course. Her work was chosen for the Best American Travel Writing in 2021, and she has won numerous awards, including an honorable mention as Travel Journalist of the Year in the 2021 Lowell Thomas Travel Journalism Awards. She is a disciple of maps, a connoisseur of global junk food, a hoarder of hotel pens, and a master at sleeping through long-haul flights. Please welcome Sarah Khan.
Thank you so much, and hi everyone. How's everyone doing today?
Good.
Yeah? Well, thanks for being here. I hope everyone's excited to learn about travel writing. Let us get going. All right. So I'm Sarah Khan, and I get told over and over that I have a dream job, and you know what? I kind of do. I can't imagine doing anything else at this point, but I get paid to explore the world and report back what I see, and my work has taken me to all 7 continents and both poles for my dream publications, the New York Times, Condé Nast Traveler, Travel and Leisure, Food and Wine. And in fact, if you go to a newsstand today, you will see this magazine, Bon Appetit. I don't know if any of you guys read it, maybe your parents subscribe. It is a food magazine, and the cover story is mine. It's about a restaurant I went to in India last year. And then I also, if you go to the newsstand, I also have a story, or a few stories in Time magazine this week, and in Condé Nast Traveler. So I can be a little prolific, I get around. All right, so before we get into all of that. So when I'm traveling, I do a little thing on my social media where I post clues about where I'm at before I reveal it, and I make them guess where in the world is Sarah Khan. So I'm gonna try that with you guys. This one's a little tricky, so you don't have to get super specific, but okay, I see a hand over there. It is in Africa. Any guesses where in Africa?
Algeria.
Whoa, were you in the last session? Yeah?
No, I'm kidding.
Well, that was in Algeria, that was the Sahara Desert. Very cool. All right, this one?
Bosnia.
Did someone say Bosnia?
Bosnia.
Are there a lot of people that are in this? I didn't realize. Okay, so you guys are going to hear the same thing again. Sorry, guys. But yes, that is Bosnia. It's a Sufi monastery on the water. But maybe for the next one, if you were here last period, don't guess.
Missouri.
Not Missouri, but not a good guess either. Sorry, I was trying to see if there's a way I could spin. Okay, yes, it is India. I get it. You were there. This is a part of India, in South India, called Hampi, that's known for these historic temples, but also this really unique rocky landscape. All right, that is me at my high school graduation in Sharon, Massachusetts in 1999, and that is me in Antarctica in 2022, which was actually the year I went to all 7 continents in 6 months. So how did I get here? How did I get from little Sharon High to reporting and safari in Sri Lanka, in Uzbekistan, somewhere floating around near the North Pole? So I'm going to tell you guys a bit about my career. It sounds like some of you have already heard it, but take everything I say with a grain of salt if this is something you think you're interested in, because the industry has changed so much in the last 20 years since I've been doing this. When I started, social media wasn't really a thing, and now it's a whole career that you can do with every magazine and newspaper has entire social media departments. So there's a lot of different paths to get here, and here's what mine was. So I was born in Canada, grew up in Saudi Arabia and India, and when I was living in Saudi Arabia, my dad worked for the airline, which meant we traveled a lot, and my mother was a freelance journalist writing about culture and travel and food. So I like to say my job today is kind of like a mix of what I was exposed to from them growing up, where I kind of got to see the journalism as a career, what that actually looks like. So when I was 8 years old, I decided I was going to be a journalist, and I've never wanted to be anything else. Travel, I didn't realize back then that that's what I wanted to do specifically, but I always knew travel would be a big part of my life. And so despite having figured out what I wanted to do so young, I didn't actually do that much about it necessarily in high school and college. I wrote a bit for the high school paper, wrote a bit for the college paper. I did major in English and communications at Boston College, and then I got a master's in magazine journalism at Syracuse. But I wasn't interning in media. So the whole point is basically, even if this is something you want to do, you don't have to be worried if you're not doing it yet. So in college, I would actually encourage people to specialize in other things, maybe major in econ or art history or just something else so you develop more expertise and interests, because journalism is something you can learn on the job later on. So after grad school, I moved back to Boston where my parents were, and initially worked in public relations, which is another side of media. Was not what I wanted to do, but I needed to pay off my student loans. And then after a year, I decided if I was serious about journalism, I had to move to New York. And this is, again, 20 years ago, New York was the center of media. It's not so much the case anymore. You can actually do this from a lot of different places. And I would argue that if you're interested in travel journalism specifically, you don't need to be in New York. You probably would be better off being somewhere else. But back then, New York was kind of New York or nowhere, so I got a job at a local city magazine called Gotham, which was a fun place to work because I was new to the city and I was learning about the food and the society and all the cool stuff that was happening in New York. But also, more importantly, I mean, I would have taken any job anywhere, but this worked out really well because it was a fun publication and it was a really small staff. So when you're in a small publication, you end up taking on a lot more roles and responsibilities than what your actual job description is. So within 6 months, I was writing cover stories. Whereas if I was at a bigger magazine, you're very regimented and like your role is all you do, and it takes a while to kind of move up the ladder. So I think that was a really good opportunity for me. After a few years there, I decided for my next move, I did want to focus on travel. So I moved to a travel magazine called Travel and Leisure that some of you might have heard of. And that was a great opportunity to learn from the best in the industry about what makes a good travel story. What are they looking for when they're assigning stories to writers? And I think that information and that insight was invaluable when a few years later I moved to South Africa, and that's when I started freelancing, which is what I'm still doing today. And when I moved to South, so I'll talk a little bit about freelance versus on staff later, but when I moved to South Africa, I initially thought I'd look for a full-time job at a magazine there, but I realized if I was a freelancer, which means writing independently for different types of newspapers from there, that would probably give me a lot more interesting opportunities. And within 6 months, I was writing for all of my dream publications, covering the African continent. And so I continued freelancing even after I moved back. I did do a year in the Middle East again as editor-in-chief of Condé Nast Traveler's Middle East edition, which I'll talk about a bit later. But now I've been a freelance travel journalist for 12 years, I think, this year, which means I've been traveling more than 100,000 miles a year most years and staying at dozens of hotels in amazing places, and that is how I make my living today. So what is travel writing? Travel writing, as we know it now, has its roots in the colonial era, when European adventurers would travel around the empire and report back what they saw, which included a lot of racism and exoticism often, which is something we still kind of struggle with today. But that was sort of its roots, and now it is essentially a beat, which is a specialty within journalism, just like fashion or news or sports or food. And so it is also what we call service journalism, where you're basically giving a service to your readers, you're helping them with something. In this case, you're helping them plan a trip with helpful tips or inspiration. And it is a real job. A lot of people think I'm just constantly lying at the beach with a mocktail. That is part of it, yes, but there's also a lot more that goes into it. When you're trying to tell thoughtful, nuanced stories about destinations, that involves a lot of research and pre-planning before you get there to make sure you're kind of in the right direction. It involves a lot of like scheduling while you're there. I'm not just relaxing and going from the pool to the beach and back and forth. I'm usually out and about interviewing and squeezing as much as I can while into the trip, and then when I come back, there's often follow-up interviews and more things that I need to do to make sure I get the story, and then I actually have to write the thing. So there is a lot that goes into it. But something that I really value in what I do is a cultural impact. I always say media today can be very polarizing, where depending on your political or social or cultural views, you might only read certain places that appeal to you. But when it comes to travel, no matter what your background is, no matter what your interests are, everybody loves to travel, and you're going to probably go to the New York Times travel section to see their recommendations for 36 hours in Los Angeles, or you're going to go to Condé Nast Traveler. So when you're writing for these publications, you have this really unique opportunity to appeal to people of all backgrounds and really tell thoughtful stories that can really shine a light on these different communities and cultures that you're passionate about to readers from all over the world and all different types of walks of life. So that's something that's really important to me. Guidebook writing, not so relevant anymore, I don't think. I don't know how many people really actively use guidebooks, but when you think of a guidebook, they're these like thick books that kind of have everything you need about a destination, which is hotels and restaurants for all different types of palates and museum opening and closing times. So some travel writers do work on guidebooks. That is one way you can make a living, but they are trying to tell you everything you can do in a place. Whereas travel journalism, writing for magazines and newspapers, is more about telling a very specific story about a place. You're not trying to tell someone how to do everything in one place. You're telling them more about the food scene or about the art scene, or you're looking at a destination through a very specific lens that helps tighten your narrative. You're not just trying to cram everything in. Still some more. Travel journalists versus content creation. So I get this a lot because people don't really get the difference between what I do and what content creators do. But as you see on TikTok and YouTube, they're usually creating really great videos and reels, or sometimes they have blogs. Journalists like myself, we are writing for publications, for the New York Times, for Condé Nast Traveler. That's who's paying my bills. Content creators are independent and working with hotel brands or tourism boards or certain brands that they might use, and it's about kind of telling the story of that brand for their audience. So it's a different thing. It's just two important sides of media. They both have their own function, but it's not quite the same. And it's just kind of, people don't necessarily get the distinction, but they are pretty different. Content creation and influencing doesn't necessarily need that much writing. It's a lot more about video and storytelling in different ways, but it is a different way of storytelling. Editing versus writing are two essential roles at any newspaper or magazine, but very different functions. Editors are the ones who plan the magazine, plan the lineup, plan which stories go in, assign the stories, and shape the stories, whereas writers are the ones that actually write the stories. Some people can do both really well. Most editors are good writers, but usually people tend to gravitate towards one or the other. You don't really find too many people that do both. And then I talk about on-staff versus freelance a lot. I've done both. I've been full-time at a single magazine. That just means you work only for that magazine. And then I'm currently freelance, which means I can write for as many different places as I want. And I think if you're interested in doing something like what I do, it's important to know that usually a magazine, the stories in the magazine are written by freelancers. They're not written by the editors. So editors are usually tied to their desk, just getting everything ready to go. It's the freelancers that are kind of out about exploring the world. All right, so I'm going to tell you a bit about my process now that you understand what it is that I do. First is the research and the pitching. There's a lot that goes into putting together a travel story, and that means first is the idea. The idea is the most important part. Why is this a good idea? Who am I going to interview? What are the reasons that makes this a good idea right now? Is there a news hook, or is there something that's been changing or something emergent? Which publication do I want to write it for, and why is this a good story for that publication? Has that publication done anything like this before? So there's a lot of research that goes into that before I get to the pitch, which is the email that I send to an editor with a few paragraphs kind of explaining the idea, who I'm going to interview, how I envision it coming together. And then that's what I send, and you never just go, hey, I want to write about Paris. You have to be like, I have this idea about this neighborhood in Paris that's really up and coming that nobody's written about, but here are 3 really cool new galleries that have just opened there, and this is why your readers would love it. That's what goes into the pitch, and then you hit send. Once the editor goes, oh, I love it, that's the greatest idea I've heard all week, please go, I'll send you lots of money, have a lot of fun. Then comes the planning, which is this is probably the most involved part for me, where I do a lot of research. First is the logistics, right? Like, how am I gonna get there? What's the best flight time? What train connections might I need when I get there? Which hotels, which neighborhoods make sense? But then there's also, who am I gonna interview? What museums are open on the days that I'm actually in town? Because sometimes I've landed up in a place and I only have one afternoon to go somewhere, and the thing I need to see isn't open. So it's just a lot of planning that goes into it. I usually make a spreadsheet where I kind of outline day by day what I'm gonna be doing and have an itinerary ready. And I usually have some appointments done in advance, and then some afternoons and days or blocks of time I'll leave free to just sort of see what happens, because you need some spontaneous moments too. Then is the actual traveling and reporting. Once you've done all the legwork that I've done in the research phase, it usually kind of is pretty seamless. You kind of just have to get out there, make sure you see and do everything, check every box. I usually take somebody with me, which is fun for them because it's like a free trip if I take my husband or a family member or a friend. And then I like to take my notes by hand because for me personally, that gets my creative juices going a lot more than writing on my phone, but people do both ways. And then once I come back is the organizing and writing, where I transcribe all my notes into a Google Doc. I'll pull out key notes and sections and quotes and things that I think will work really well in the final draft. If I have any follow-up interviews I need to do, I'll do them now, and then I'll start actually writing the draft. And then it doesn't end when I hit send. There's a whole editing process, which includes, the editor might come back to me with a few questions. There's a whole fact-checking team that verifies every single thing that goes into the story. You might need to go back and forth with them. And then once you're done with that, if it's a digital story, it might go to print within an hour, a couple hours, or a day or two. If it's a print story, so this cover story, like I said, it was in India. I did the travel in September. I think I filed the draft in November. The edits were after the holidays in January, and I might have gone into early February, and then it went into print, and it just came out last week. So print cycles can take a really long time before you actually see the story in your hands. And then social media, I'm not a content creator, so I'm not making snappy reels, but I do post a lot when I travel, and then I'll post my articles when they're done. But one really important function for me is when I'm traveling, sometimes I'll find interesting sources or people that I should interview when I'm there. And sometimes I'll make friends, where if I'm traveling solo, which I do a lot, and I'm in Colombo and I'm looking for things to do, sometimes people are like, hey, I'll take you there, and I'll just make a friend that way, which is really nice, because if I'm traveling with friends, I'm usually not being that outgoing and trying to make random friends. All right, so are there any questions so far in the process? Anyone? Okay, I can't really see anyway, but all right, so I'm gonna now go into a few of the stories that I've written and explain how they came together. So this was a story I did on Bosnia and Herzegovina for the New York Times in 2018 during a time when there was a lot of anti-refugee and anti-Muslim sentiment bubbling in Europe. And so a lot of that discourse was around like, oh, Muslims aren't from here, they're foreign, they're invading, like that kind of sentiment. And I was like, well, actually Bosnia is a country in the heart of Europe that is an indigenous Muslim country. And, you know, they've always been there. So I want to do a story on that. And at the same time, Croatia, right next door, was getting a lot of buzz in travel magazines. So I was like, well, everybody's going to Croatia, but nobody's writing about this beautiful country right next door. I want to go do that story. So my editor at the New York Times commissioned me that. And it was honestly, like, as you can see, this is a city called Mostar, absolutely stunning. And it was just a really beautiful, beautiful place and like a really memorable trip for me personally. Condé Nast Traveler, this is an example of a story that was assigned to me, where I have a really good relationship with Condé Nast Traveler. I'm a contributing editor there. And so they wanted a story on Uzbekistan. And I said, well, I actually have Uzbek ancestry that I know very little about. Before my ancestors got to India, they were in Uzbekistan for a couple hundred years. So I did a story kind of tracing the footsteps of, or just what my ancestors might have been doing in the height of the Silk Road in Central Asia. And that was a lens that I brought to this story. The New York Times, Making Myself at Home, this was a story about, so in 2017, there was a Muslim travel ban announced, and I don't usually write about politics, but I was like, well, this is a travel ban, this is kind of in my beat now, so I was trying to think of a creative way I could respond to the moment. And so I pitched my editor at the Times about, I want to just, like, as you can see from most of my other stories, I don't cover the US a lot. I like to travel overseas as much as possible. I pitched a story about traveling across America as a Muslim American woman and just kind of exploring my own home country in my backyard. And it was a lot of fun because I just did a lot of those cool classic Americana things. I went to Nashville and went line dancing and had so much fun. I went to Memphis and went to Graceland. I went to Minnesota, I went to the Mall of America, I went to Wyoming, went to rodeo, so it was just like this whole big ambitious trip around the country, and it was one of my favorite stories I've ever written. It was really eye-opening for me, and it also won a lot of awards. This story I did in Ethiopia for Travel and Leisure. So when you're on assignment, you're usually writing one story for one place. But as a freelancer, you actually have the freedom to write many stories if you want. So I was in Addis Ababa, the capital of Ethiopia, for a New York Times story, but I had a couple of days to do another trip. So I just went to the city called Harar on my own, wasn't getting paid to do it, wasn't an assignment, but I just really, really liked it. And so even if I'm on vacation, I'll usually take notes in case I find a good story. So when I got back, in addition to writing my New York Times story on Addis, I pitched this story to my editor at Travel and Leisure, and it was just like a really nice little vignette of a place that doesn't really get a lot of coverage. And it also won some awards and was in the Best American Travel Writing Anthology in 2021. And this Bloomberg story is an example of one that came to me based on my expertise that I've built over my career, which is I write a lot about the Middle East and Africa because I've lived in both regions. And so Algeria has historically been very closed off to tourism. And my editor there reached out to me saying, I hear they're planning on relaxing the visa a bit, and we want to do a story on what's there, kind of comparing it to Morocco right next door, which obviously gets tons and tons of tourists. And since you write a lot about the Middle East and Africa, we thought you might be the one to do this for us. So I went out there. It was the hardest visa I've ever had to get. It was so complicated. But when the result of that is when I got there were so few foreign tourists. And especially having been to Morocco and Tunisia on either side, it was unbelievable to be in a place where you literally could spend hours without seeing another foreigner. And the result is the culture just feels so real and not lived for the foreign gaze in a way that you don't get to see very often. And this was another fun one that came to me where I write about India a lot. So an editor said, we want to send you to Jaipur in India to write about the jewelry scene because they're known for their jewelry craftsmanship for centuries. So that basically means I got paid to go and wear millions and millions of dollars of jewelry, like in the picture on the right. And the final cover, the story was a cover story in this travel magazine called Virtuoso, and that is the Maharaja of Jaipur on the cover. And any K-drama fans this period? Because I didn't have any last period. No? Okay, wow. I just thought I thought there was more of a thing around this, but I guess not. Maybe it's over. But in 2020, in the heart of the pandemic, I fell in love with Korean dramas because I wasn't traveling anymore, so this was just a way for me to discover a culture I knew nothing about. So as soon as borders reopened, I pitched my editor that I really want to go there. I've been seeing this country through these shows for so long, now I want to see it in real life. And that was a really fun story to report. And then, as I mentioned, I was also editor-in-chief of Condé Nast Traveler Middle East in Dubai for a year, and this was a totally different challenge than writing because as an editor, you're editor-in-chief, you're overseeing everything. You're overseeing the advertising, you're overseeing events, like anything related to the brand, I was in charge of. So it's very different from what I've been doing as a freelancer, but it's a really great challenge, and especially as someone who grew up in the region and covers the region a lot, it was just such a unique opportunity to be able to tell thoughtful stories from there, and it was a really great detour. All right, since I've been talking a lot, I'm going to do a little bit more where in the world to break things up. Anyone want to guess this one? Yep. Scotland? Nope. Anyone else?
Canada?
Nope, not Canada. One more guess? All right, no, this is Victoria Falls in Zimbabwe. All right, this one?
Rome.
Not Rome, but it is in Europe.
Greece. Latvia.
Not Latvia, not Italy. This is in Switzerland, and to be honest, I don't remember exactly where in Switzerland. Maybe I'll Google that, but it was in Switzerland. And this one?
Chad.
Not Chad, not South Africa, but you're on the right continent. It's in Africa.
Nigeria.
Not Nigeria. Not Algeria.
Kenya.
Not Kenya, but I guess we're going to name all 54 countries. No, this is in Namibia. This is a salt pan called a dead flay, surrounded by the Sossusvlei dunes, which are some of the tallest dunes in the world. And honestly, Namibia as a country is unbelievable. It's like the second least populated country in the world after Mongolia, I think. And it's just these dramatic landscapes everywhere you go. And I think this is the last one I have here. Anyone want to guess this? It's also in Africa. Not Greece.
Madagascar.
Not Madagascar.
South Africa.
Not South Africa. It's in East Africa. It's in Kenya, yes. This is Lamu Archipelago in Kenya, which is known for these distinctive boats with these sails called dhow boats. All right, so a couple of other things that are important to me. Diversity, it's important in all of journalism, obviously, as far as who tells stories, who edits the stories, what we think is important. But when it comes to travel journalism, like I mentioned earlier, there's still this colonial hangover. And I think we really need just more diverse perspectives, sharing stories around the world. And that doesn't just mean like me as an Indian American writing about India. It means I want to see more Black writers writing about Japan and more Asian writers writing about Mexico. And you just want to see diverse perspectives. So some colleagues and I had started something called Travel is Better in Color to really champion diverse writers, photographers, publicists, everyone involved in travel media. And because one thing I always say is that what one person's daily commute is another person's exotic. So you should always be cautious about what your biases you're bringing to a destination as a visitor. And so anyone is allowed to tell any story, but even if you're not from a background, it's all that more important that you tell the stories of the locals. You don't center your own point of view, you center the voices of the people that you're meeting. And so you interview as many people as possible and make sure you're being true to what they believe is their hometown and not what you think as an outsider helicoptering in. And then some pros and cons about what I get to do. Amazing travel. I've been on 25 safaris, all 7 continents, both poles, all for work. Stayed at some of the best hotels in the world. And, you know, there's a lot of perks with this for sure. I really enjoy it. But another thing I really love is the unique access to people and places. When you're traveling as a tourist, you can only really get in so much, right? But when you're traveling as a journalist, you're trying to tell a story, you're reaching out to a lot more people, and people are really opening up their homes and their lives to you because they want to make sure you get a good story about what it is they're doing. So I always talk about Tunisia. I was there to do a story on the design scene, which is a really cool design scene. Tunis is a really, really cool city. And then when I was there, I got connected to one person who connected me to another person, and I was literally hanging out with the coolest people in Tunis in a way that I don't think I would have had access to all those people if I was just visiting. Flexibility, I don't have a 9 to 5. I can design my schedule, my travel, my home days, exactly how I want them. Don't have to worry about early starts. Sometimes there was a lot of late finishes though. I'm more creative at night, so I end up writing late night, but you know, I get to decide what that looks like. And there's a variety of projects that you can do with your writing skills. I am currently working on a coffee table book. I have a New York Times story that's coming out next week that's in edits. A few more stories that I'm writing. I'm brainstorming a book idea, doing voiceovers for some videos that I shot. So there's never a dull day. And then at this point in my career, I can be really selective and only take on work that I want to do, which I really love. Earlier in your career, you're going to kind of have to do it all, so it is what it is. But at this point, I feel like I've really gotten to a place where I enjoy every single thing that I'm working on. But there are negatives because, with any job, no matter how glamorous it looks, feast or famine, you just have to get used to riding that out. Sometimes when it rains, it pours, you have more work than you know what to do with and you're incredibly overwhelmed. Sometimes you literally have no idea what your next assignment is. And that's just kind of the way the cadence of it is, and you just have to get used to that. There's no benefits or a steady salary, but I would argue the income potential is massive because you can constantly be taking on different kinds of projects. You're not limited to one paycheck. But if you are somebody that needs a consistent paycheck every month, then this might not be the right way. The no routine thing can get really taxing, especially as I've gotten older, because I like to be able to cook and I like to be able to work out and I like to be able to have some semblance of a steady routine. And when my travel schedule is crazy, that completely goes out the window. Even at this point in my career, there's a lot of rejection. When you're in any industry, any business, especially if you're self-employed and you're pitching things out there to any kinds of clients, there's always going to be rejection. So you just need to be able to have a thin skin and know that you can't take it personally and you just have to dust yourself off and move on to the next person that you're going to pitch. And then there is an issue with the industry in general with declining pay rates and struggling publications. But one thing that I do like about what I do, especially as a freelancer, is every industry needs good writers. And there's always going to be ways that your work will be in demand. It might not be in the way you set out to do with traditional print magazines, but there's so many different things. I do some consulting with travel brands that are looking to do some creative writing. So there's always something you can do with this skill set. And then finally, does anybody now want to be a travel writer after this, or have I bored you all to tears? Okay, I have one travel writer. Okay, maybe two future travel writers here. All right. Well, I'm going to tell you a little bit about what you need to know and do. One thing is read a lot of other travel writers. This might sound obvious, but I still, at this point, when I'm writing a new story, get inspired by other writers in just terms of how they look at a destination, what interesting turns of phrase they use, what just fun metaphors or allegories they bring in, not to copy them, but just to kind of think about how other people approach it. So you should always be reading other writers just to get inspired by how other people approach the English language. Ask a lot of questions. You are given a license to be nosy with this kind of job, so just take full advantage. Ask anything and everything. People are always happy to answer because they want to make sure you get the story right. Even if you don't travel that much, your hometown is a travel destination. Chicago is constantly on, Condé Nast Traveler's best city in America list. Like, other people come here a lot, so there could be amazing travel stories in your own backyard that you can pitch. And when you do travel, whether it's study abroad or family vacations, definitely always be looking for story ideas there too. And then if you have the opportunity and the privilege to move overseas, I do think my career really took off because I was living in South Africa and I had access to interesting stories in a destination that doesn't get covered a lot. And it's a destination that's really expensive to send writers to from New York, so I think editors were really excited to hear what I had to say. So if you're able to move somewhere where you can become kind of an expert in that region, that'll give you a leg up over most writers who are based in New York or LA. And then with that, there's also finding a niche within travel. Like, travel writing is its own niche, but then within travel, I've become a bit of a country expert, a regional expert with India, Africa, and the Middle East. Some people focus more on wellness, some people focus on food, adventure. There's so much more you can be doing within that. And then the idea is you want editors to think of you when they have any general topic they want. Editors think of me when it comes to like an interesting Middle East idea. Editors think of some of my colleagues when they want to do an adventure story in Utah. So if you kind of build a niche, then editors will start thinking of your name as well, which is also important. And then just remember, a topic is not a story. You should always be asking, why this? What's important about this story? What's a unique angle and lens that I can bring to it? Why now? What is a trend or the news hook that's making it a good story now? And then why me? Am I the right person to tell this story? And let's do a couple more where in the world. This one is in Europe, if anyone wants to guess this one. No?
Romania, Italy.
Not Italy, but it's close to Italy. Malta. Who guessed that? Good one. Yes, Malta. This one, also Europe.
Romania.
Greece.
No.
Belgium. Bulgaria.
Nope. Spain. Yep, Seville, Spain. This one?
India.
Yes, India. So tigers are in India, not in Africa. So this was in Rajasthan, Ranthambore National Park. And I think this is the last one. Anyone?
Wyoming.
Cape Town, yes. This is from the top of Lion's Head Mountain, looking over the 12 Apostles Mountains in Cape Town. And that is it for me. Does anyone have any questions? Yep, on the left over there.
I was just wondering, you said in your story about when you traveled this country.
Yeah.
Won a bunch of awards, and it was really eye-opening for you. Can you speak a little bit about what your takeaways were?
Yeah, I think, I'll be honest, I kind of had gone in with a bit of trepidation at that point with the climate we were in, and I wasn't sure what I would find, because, like I said, the country can be really polarized. I just found that everybody was so welcoming and so warm, and just how much more similar we all are, because the headlines can make you think a whole different story, right? So I think it was really important for me to really spend that time and really fall in love with America, despite its challenges. Also, I fell in love with country music, which I never thought was a thing that would happen. And line dancing was so much fun, which makes sense because I'm Indian and I love Bollywood, and it's basically like American Bollywood dancing. So it was honestly just such a fun trip too.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Right here on the left.
How do you pass the language barrier in traveling and like trying to find an interview?
That is a great question. He asked about the language barrier when you're traveling. So in the countries that I have some language background, I obviously use it. I speak Urdu fluently, so that helps me in South Asia, also in the Middle East randomly because there's a big South Asian community. And then I have really bad French and Spanish, which also helps in a lot of parts of the world. But one thing is I've done, in places like Turkey and stuff, I've actually done some interviews with Google Translate where I literally type things into the phone, hand it over, they type the responses. And often, especially if I'm in a place where I know I have a lot of interviews to do and there's going to be a big language barrier, I'll hire a tour guide that will help be the translator. Right here.
What's your favorite place that you've ever been?
So that is always a really tough question. From some of the places I talked about today, like Bosnia is one of my favorite places, I think, because it was beautiful and just very powerful. They have a very tough history. And I think that was really eye-opening too. Tunisia was just, so I actually I spend a lot of time in North Africa, but I thought Tunisia was very similar to Morocco, and it was so different. And like I said, really hip and cool. The food was phenomenal. And then I think one of the more eye-opening trips too was I did a road trip through Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania, and I didn't know much about the region, didn't know what to expect, and it was just really cool design scene, delicious food that I still think about 10 years later, just like really cool landscapes, and I think I like places that just surprise me, and I'm not expecting much, and then they just blow me away, so I think that was one of those. Back there?
If you had to pick one, which country has the best food?
Oh wow, best food. I can't pick one, don't make me pick one. Well, the first thing that always comes to mind, honestly, is Tunisia, because the street food there was unbelievable. But honestly, if you're just looking for across the board, South Africa, like the food is great. The steaks there are phenomenal, and they cost like $10, and it just can't eat like a steak in America anymore because they're just like you pay so much and it's not as good. But they have so many different types of food and influences there. So yeah, maybe South Africa. Good question. Yep. Beginner New Yorkers, as in like you're moving there? Oh, do everything. Get out there, take the subway all the time, like just walk the city, like literally, and don't spend your time in Times Square or the obvious places, just like go pick a random neighborhood deep in Brooklyn and just walk around. And I think like walking is the best way to explore New York, and I still do it. Like I've been there for almost 20 years, and like there's nothing I like more on a weekend than just picking a random neighborhood and walking around and seeing what I find. Yep.
So for the freelancing, how does the finances work? Are they footing the bill of publication? Are they giving you an expense account? Or?
Yes, so as a freelancer, when I pitch a story, if I'm going somewhere on assignment, the publication is paying for it. So they're paying me the fee for the story, and then they're usually covering the expenses, like the flight and everything to get there. Sometimes I'll go on assignment and I'll get paid from the magazine, but then the actual flights and the expenses will be covered by a tourism board or a hotel group or someone that wants to get me out there. So that's the main ways. Like I don't usually, if I'm going on assignment, I'm not paying out of pocket, because if somebody wants to send me somewhere, that's on them. So it's either the publication itself or it's someone that's involved with the story that I'm going to be telling is hosting me. Yep, back there.
Is there anything that protects your pitch? Like if you offer a pitch, like the K-drama, and they're like, no thank you, but they give it to someone else, is there anything that protects that?
Oh, that's such a good question. No, sadly. So the thing is, ethically speaking, they can't do that, right? So like most editors have morals, and that's just not a thing. Like that's just like an industry standard. You can't, if someone pitches you a story, even if you don't want it, then you don't want it, and they get to pitch it somewhere else, it's their idea. You cannot give it to another writer or do it on staff. Unfortunately, it does still happen, and I don't know how to protect. It's just kind of like bad editors. So freelancers usually talk, so like we'll share like, oh, this editor told me no, and then they gave it to someone else, so that kind of creates a reputation. So that's another reason editors don't want to do that. That's happened to me once or twice, and I just don't pitch that person ever again because I'm like, now I know better. But like I said, for the most part, people know there's a general, because the idea belongs to you. So the idea is if they don't want it, they can't give it to someone else because you are now going to take it somewhere else. So what if your competitor is now running that same exact story? Because, so yeah, it's an unfortunate thing that does happen. Luckily, not that often. But good question. All right, any more questions? Right here?
When you travel, do you take your photos or do you have photographers?
For the stories, I don't take the pictures. I just take pictures for my own social media and my own fun, but the actual pictures that get published in these articles, they always send a photographer separately after I file the story, is typically what happens. So there are some writers who are writer photographers. I'm definitely not one of them. I'm not that good. But that's more rare because typically they want you to specialize in one thing. They don't want you to be a jack of all trades. So most people just do one or the other. Any more questions? No. Oh, right here?
Is there a place you haven't visited?
Yes, I'm dying to go to Japan. I really, really want to go to Japan. Dying to go. So I don't know when I'm going yet, but that is at the top of my wish list. Yep.
So, like, marriage and family relationships are tough enough as is. Does being a travel writer make it tougher or actually kind of easier in a way?
It does make it tougher. So I got married later in life, though, I guess. So I think I'm at a point where I don't want to travel as aggressively as I used to in my 20s. So in that way, it's working out timing-wise, it's worked out. But it is hard. You have to balance that. Like, that's part of when I said having no routine. I want to be able to spend time with my husband and spend time at home and hopefully have a family someday. So it is tricky, but I do know a lot of travel writers who have multiple kids and still travel a lot and write amazing stuff. So there is a way to balance it. I haven't gotten to that phase. I'm still in the phase of making sure I spend enough time with my husband and then enough time doing what I want to do. And then the fun thing is, though, he gets to come with me a lot. So we went gorilla trekking in Rwanda last year because I had a story in Kigali, and he just tagged along. So he'd never been to Africa before he got married, and now he's been on 3 safaris in 3 years. So we try to also do that where he can kind of come with me when he can. All right. Yep, right there.
You talked about how long the print cycle was. Have you ever had a story not work anymore because it took so long to be printed?
That is a really good question. I haven't had that happen. That does happen. Like, say sometimes you file a story and it's ready to go, and then there's like political upheaval in that country, and then they have to hold or kill the story. That luckily hasn't happened to me. I have had once a story I wrote and was ready to go, and it didn't work out for some reason. I can't remember what it was. So all writers, when you're freelancing, you have a contract with every single story. So publications have what they call kill fees. So if they're not going to run it for no fault of your own, just whatever their own internal needs are, they give you a portion of your final fee, and then you're welcome to go pitch that story somewhere else. But good question. Anyone else? Nope.